Max, football is back. That means we're all excited. Plans being hatched, and the road to the state championships is beginning right now for programs around the state. Also means full contact and injury prevention is kind of on the top of mind. Dr. Benjamin May is a sports medicine physician with Baylor, Scott & White, joining us to talk about spotting, monitoring, and preventing concussions. Dr. May, thanks for taking a little bit of time to talk with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
When it comes to football, I feel like the public recognition and treatment of concussions has really evolved over the last couple of decades. In your experience, how has the association of concussions and football changed within the medical world?
Well, it's been kind of slow, I think. For many years we've known that hits to the head can cause concussions. I think we're getting a better idea, better understanding of the fact that smaller hits can still cause major symptoms. I think we're gaining a better understanding of the higher risk for recurrence of concussions, especially if a player returns too quickly from an original concussion. And then we're also beginning to kind of deal with the issue of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. And we don't know that CTE and concussions are related, but logically it seems like they would be.
Sure, absolutely. And do you think that you've seen attitudes change among the patients and the parents that you're seeing?
I think they're starting to. I think it's also been a little slow. When I first began treating concussions, the focus always seemed to be with how quickly the player is going to get better so that they can return to the field. And I think that now I still have many encounters that go that way, but I get a lot more questions about the long-term effects, how it's going to affect their school, and whether the player should return at all.
Texas loves football more than any other part of the country, and that means we want to keep the sport thriving. We got to be smarter about how we spot concussions. What are the signs that football players and especially, I think, coaches should be looking out for?
Yeah, there are really many signs and symptoms. Some of them are obvious, like loss of concussion or loss of consciousness, confusion, memory loss, poor balance, dilated eyes, things like that. But many of them are much more subtle: light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, difficulty concentrating, trouble at school, change in personality, irritability, or sleep disturbances.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that it can be a hard thing to diagnose sometimes, and I know that it's really important for people to identify the symptoms early. We're talking with Dr. Benjamin May, a sports medicine physician with Baylor, Scott & White here on Texas Football Today. Get involved in the conversation, #TF Today. Coach, Coach, I'm so used to talking to coaches. Contact is inevitable in football, but are there ways that coaching staffs can prevent concussions within their ranks?
I think so. Some things are just limiting unnecessary contact as much as possible. I think limiting contact between players of different sizes, so you don't want your star running back to run over a freshman linebacker. There's no helmet that's been proven to prevent concussions, but evidence suggests that if the helmet doesn't fit well, the risk is higher. So I think making sure that the players have proper fitting equipment, making sure that all the straps are used at all times. And I believe that it's important to check players frequently. It's not always just the big hit that can cause a concussion. Oftentimes it's a smaller hit or one that's away from the play that you don't notice.
You brought up something really interesting that I think about a lot, which is the weight thing. You talk about a 200-pound guy going up against 140 pounds. We don't let 200-pounders box with 140-pound guys. I feel like in football, that's definitely something that we can keep an eye on, is making sure that, there's inevitably going to be some size disparity on the field. But I do feel like if you've got, sometimes just a size thing, that if one guy's bigger than another guy, maybe keep them out of harm's way in that regard.
Absolutely, and it's a difficult thing to do, especially in small schools where you have freshmen often playing on the varsity and things like that. But at least in practice, you can limit that a little bit more.
I want to ask you about concussion protocols. We hear about that all the time in football. In your opinion, what's the best course of treatment and observation for players when we think that they may have a concussion?
That's not exactly a straightforward answer. Every player is going to be a little bit different. So in Texas, the law states that any player who I think may have suffered a concussion, and it doesn't have to be me, any team doctor, any trainer, any coach, or the parent. If they think that a concussion may have occurred, then the player has to be taken out and cannot return until they've been cleared by a physician. So after the player's been removed, in general, we recommend that the player have close monitoring for 2 to 3 hours to make sure that it's not something more serious like a bleed in the brain or a skull fracture or something like that. So they would be monitored for numbness, tingling, weakness, severe headaches, intractable vomiting, things like that. Most of the time that's not going to occur. So over the next couple of days after a concussion, we usually recommend brain rest, which is essentially as little physical activity or brain stimulation as possible. So you limit screen time, you limit bright lights, you limit loud noises. I tell players to sit down and listen to classical music or books on tape. And then after that 2 to 3 days, so if a concussion occurred on Friday, usually that Monday or Tuesday, you're going to try to get in to see your doctor or a doctor that's comfortable treating concussions, as a lot of doctors are kind of getting a little more wary of them. And the doctor will talk to you about what symptoms you might have. Is there any other treatment or imaging or things like that that might be needed? And then they'll talk to you about when it might be safe to begin that return to play protocol. And that's kind of been outlined in different studies. And essentially it's generally a 5-step process where you gradually increase the amount of physical activity and practice time and things like that to make sure that symptoms don't return. And then once you're able to get through those 5 steps, then you can begin to have game activity again.
Dr. May, we talked a little bit before about how this is, football is such a part of our culture here in Texas, so ingrained in what Texanness is all about. What advice would you give to parents who are concerned about concussions but want their kids to, still have the opportunity to play football?
Sure. I've heard a lot about Drew Brees, and he's a big proponent of flag football for amateur athletes. I think that's a good place to start, maybe sticking with flag football until the high school level. But beyond that, you limit contact as much as possible. Instead, you focus on technique, strengthening, agility, speed, things that you need to play football but don't require contact to the head. And also, I recommend playing other sports during the off season. You learn other skills, you learn hand-eye coordination, you strengthen different muscle groups, and that's going to benefit you during football, and it's going to keep you away from blows to the head.
That's good advice. We hear that from a lot of coaches about how they want all their players to be multi-sport players or athletes as well. I think that's good advice from Dr. Benjamin May, a sports medicine physician with Baylor Scott and White. Doctor, I appreciate your time. Thanks for the insights, and best of luck to you down the road.
No problem. I appreciate your time. Thank you.